Thank you all for being here. So today I'm going to talk to you about someone whose work has been really, really important to me over the years. And in fact, you know, I've sort of had a relationship with Lynda Barry's work for 30 years. She's someone who has been very, very important to me. And you know, when I was having dinner with some of the faculty members last night, they were asking me what I was going to talk about, and I said, you know, I'm just kind of going to fangirl all over Lynda Barry. You know, so I want to sort of introduce you to her work, and not just her work, but also her creative process, her ways of thinking about creativity, and her structural approaches to generating creative work. But before I start, I just wanted to find out, and maybe we can just do this as a show of hands, who knows who Lynda Barry is? Okay, so only a couple people. All right, so I guess this is all going to be new to you. So Lynda Barry, I think, is probably primarily known as a cartoonist and an illustrator. In the 80s and 90s, she had a very popular comic strip that ran in independent papers. It was called Ernie Pook's Comiques. Okay, and that's sort of how she started off. She started off doing these comics, these really brilliant, sort of deep comics that delved into memory. I mean, we'll look at some of it. But so that's sort of what she was known for a long time. But then in 1999, she published, you know, what I think is one of the best novels of like the last 50 years, this novel called Cruddy. So she's also a novelist. But then, sort of more recently, I think she's really become known as an educator and kind of a creativity guru. For many years, she led what became this legendary workshop called Writing the Unthinkable. She did it at this place called Omega, which is an institute in upstate New York where they teach like all kinds of things. They teach like meditation and yoga and crystals and whatever, but they also do different kinds of creativity workshops, and she used to do that for many years. Now I think she's actually teaches at the University of Wisconsin. But these workshops, and I was lucky enough to actually take one of these workshops became legendary, and I think she has sort of a cult following of people who are obsessed with her and her creative techniques. So what I'm going to try to do today is I'm going to kind of give this hybrid talk where I want to give you a little bit of an introduction to her work, but I also want to give you an introduction to her creative process. And we're going to do some writing in this session. And in fact, toward the end of the session, I'm going to lead you through her 20-minute. She has a specific 20-minute exercise that's sort of the core of her creative process. It's an exercise that I use all the time in my own writing. I mean, probably weekly, if not more. And I've been doing that for 15 years. So we'll sort of do that at the end. And Erica had told me it's better if I keep it informal and just kind of talk. But I get a little nervous in front of groups, so I wrote out parts of my talk. So I'm going to try to talk to you, but then if I get nervous, I'm just going to start reading. So if I start reading, you know, like I'm nervous, and maybe you could just smile and say, it's okay, Rahul. And I'm actually going to start by actually reading a little passage of my experience the first time I took her Writing the Unthinkable workshop. And to give you a picture of what Lynda Barry looks like, this is she. Good, 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 good. Lynda Barry is crouched in front of me, her fingers curled on the edge of my desk, her chin level with the surface. Her head is just inches from mine. She looks like one of her cartoon characters, her eyes like caramel-covered kettle corn, her grin like a slice of watermelon. She has just finished listening to me read a scene I have written in 7 minutes during a half-day-long version of her legendary Writing the Unthinkable workshop. Good, good, good. She has said this to each and every student who has read over the course of the morning. Each time, she crouches in front of the student, intently listening to them read, and then repeats these words, always the same. Good, good. The year is 2008. I am 5 years out of my creative writing program and feeling more than a little battered by the post-MFA world. My growing collection of form letter rejections, the struggle to find meaningful paid work that won't cut too much into my writing time, the challenge some days to even put pen to paper or type 150 words that won't make me cringe. Good is not an adjective that feels particularly relevant or applicable to my creative or professional condition. And yet, despite this, when she says good, I believe her completely and fully. Her words break through some hard shell that has calcified around me and burrow deep. How can I believe her when I know that she has said the exact same words in the exact same way to countless others? Because perhaps on some level that I'm not even conscious of, I understand that what she's praising is not the sentences I've just written or the narrative that I've produced, but something else. Rather, the enthusiasm, even astonishment in her voice is because she knows that I have, at least for the moment, overcome the voice in my head that is crying out, "You are a loser. Quit. You suck. This is going nowhere." She knows that by feeling, by trusting, by diving into the deep unknown, and most importantly, by not thinking, you can't think your way out of anything, she said on more than one occasion. That I have, in fact, by writing these sentences, done the unthinkable. At the end of the half-day workshop, Barry gives me, as she does several of the students, a sketch on a piece of paper ripped from a tiny notepad of a monkey in Buddhist robes meditating. Above the meditating monkey are the words, right now, W-R-I-T-E, and then now, R-I-G-H-T, now. It is tacked over my writing desk as it has been for many, many years, a reminder of the exhilaration I feel in this moment. So that's just a little peek at something that I experienced during her workshop. And as I said, I'm gonna give you a taste of what that what that structure is like, the creative structure that she used in that workshop. This is the cover of the novel Cruddy. This is a novel that she published in 1999. So my first encounter with Lynda Barry's work was when I read her novel Cruddy in a graduate school seminar in a Bildungsroman class in 2000. Those of you who you might know, Bildungsroman means coming-of-age novel. And so it was a class I took in graduate school. We looked at a number of coming-of-age novels, and this was one of them. So that was my first encounter with Lynda Barry's work, or at least at the time, I thought it was my first encounter. A few years later, I would find among a stack of my old college papers a clipping of her cartoon, Ernie Pooch's Comics, which at the time was syndicated widely in the nation's independent weekly papers. And this is what that looks like. Yeah, you all know her. You've seen this. This is one of my favorite ones, actually. In fact, I had been reading Barry's comics for many years without quite registering her name, as it seems like you have. This particular cartoon, circa 1991, showed Marlis, a freckle-faced girl and a Barry staple. I think she's kind of the stand-in for Linda Barry. I think she's sort of like her avatar. Struggling to understand why the world is so cruel to her gay uncle. Marlis is so earnest. She's truly baffled by the prejudice that surrounds her. So I had cut this comic strip out, and I had pasted it on a sheet of paper, and I had photocopied it many times. There were like 30 copies of this comic. And I found this in a milk crate with a bunch of my stuff from college. And I have no memory of doing that. I have no memory of making 30 copies of this comic. I don't know what I did with it. But it's, it had been something really important to me at the time. And it was a time when I was not out yet. Right? And so it's like, when I discovered this, when I discovered that I had done this without even realizing that I had done it, and then how important Linda Barry has become to me later in life, it almost seemed like, I don't know, it was this weird moment. I was like, oh, wow, 30 copies of this in my college stuff? So back to Cruddy, which I read in 2000 in graduate school. So I did my MFA at Syracuse, which is it's a tiny program, and the way it's kind of designed, and you may know a little of this because I think some of I think Jeff Parker went to Syracuse and so did Jason Ockard, but it's a really tiny program, and they have 6 people each year in each genre, and the way it's designed is you kind of move through the program with just those 6 people. I mean, that's sort of your core people. And you do these sort of intensive workshops with just those 5 other people. You do other workshops too, but you spend a lot of time with those 5 other people, right? Sometimes that works really well, right? Sometimes the chemistry is good. Sometimes it's not so good. My group, I think the chemistry was pretty good, but the reason I bring it up is, sort of by design, I think the group that was picked, and I think Syracuse kind of does this, is very stylistically diverse. Right? So some MFA programs kind of have an identity, right? They kind of do a certain kind of work. Syracuse, or at least at the time, had a huge range. So amongst the 6 of us, there were people who were working very traditionally, and then there were people who were working super experimentally. And I'll say that over the 3 years, I think there wasn't a single book that the 6 of us all agreed on, except for this one. Right? This was the one book in 3. Well, actually, maybe the other person might be. We all loved Lydia Davis, but I think this is the book. This was our like Jedi book. Is that the right reference? I don't know. I don't understand Star Wars, but it was like, it was like our Jedi book. Yeah. Our what? Yeah. Anyway, it's the book that we always came back to. So what I want to do, I have a few things to say about why I think we connected so strongly to this book, but I thought maybe I could read just the first couple pages of the novel to you, and maybe you could tell me what you notice. Dear anyone who finds this, do not blame the drugs. It was not the fault of the drugs. I planned this way before the drugs were ever in my life. And do not blame Vicky Toulouseau. It was my idea to kill myself. All she did was give me a little push. If you are holding this book right now, it means that everything came out just the way I wanted it to. I got my happily ever after. Signed, sincerely yours, the author, Roberta Robeson, 1955 to 1971. Once upon a cruddy time on a cruddy street on the side of a cruddy hill in the cruddiest part of a crudded out town in a cruddy state, country, world, solar system universe. Once upon a cruddy time behind a cruddy black cat lumber on a very cruddy mud road which bubbles up very weird smells that evil genie themselves up through the cruddy dark rain and into the yellow lit up window of the cruddy top bedroom of a cruddy rental house where a cruddy girl is sitting on a cruddy bed across from this, her cruddy sister who, I will kill you if you touch this, Julie, and if you do, I swear to God, I will kill you, no mercy, no take-backs, private property. This means you, Julie, you. The cruddy girl named Roberta was writing the cruddy book of her cruddy life, and the name of the book was called Cruddy. Cruddy by the author Roberta Robeson, who is grounded until September 8th, 1972. Only 11 months and 5 more days to go. Cruddy, the famous book by the famous author Roberta Robeson, who can't even concentrate to write this because her little sister will not shut up, she will not shut up, she will not shut up, and Roberta is about to bash her little sister's head in if she does not shut up. And now it is later. Now Roberta is back from just getting in huge trouble from throwing the Q-Tex nail polish remover bottle at her sister. Roberta was aiming at her sister's arm, but it wailed on her sister's head by accident. Roberta was trying to explain to the mother it was an accident, but the mother never believes anything Roberta says anymore, since the night the mother got called to the emergency room where the author was tripping on drugs very badly, and the mother started screaming, "Drugs, drugs, drugs!" And the cords on her neck were sticking out extremely, and she had to be restrained by others to keep from killing the author, and the police kept sticking their freaky heads in close to the author's face, and their breath was quite squiddly, and they kept saying, "Where did you get the substance, Roberta? Who gave you the substance, Roberta? Where did you get it? The substance, Roberta?" And in the next cubicle, the restrained and tripping Vicky Toulousa was screaming, "Don't you narc me out, Roberta. If you narc me out, I swear to God, I will kill you." Right. So those are just like the first couple of pages of Cruddy. So tell me I know, right? It's like so fucking, it's like, buy it, read it again and again. So what do you notice? What stands out for you? Yeah, sure. Repetition? Okay, good, good. So are you talking about like the repetition of Cruddy, or like were there other repetitions you noticed? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. What else did you notice?
I think she just did a really wonderful job of capturing a child's voice, or if somebody who's younger, with like the constant stream of thought kind of deal that happens when a younger person's writing. She's not trying to edit herself; she's just writing exactly what she feels.
Nice. Okay. So. Right, because capturing a child voice is so hard, right? But it sounds like part of what you're saying is, at least part of the way she does it, is by doing that kind of like stream of consciousness thing where it feels like this is just like what's popping into her head. Although, of course, it's like really crafted, right? But it gives you that feeling, right? Yeah. What?
It's like a constant system of desperation all the way through it. And like these voices in her head that just never stop and just go and go and go.
Yeah.
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 Let alone the voices outside.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. Any other thing? Yeah. What did you notice?
There's like a constant thread of violence too.
Yep.
And there's an innocence to the violence at the same time, like
Yes.
unintentional, but at the same time, kind of this looming moral violence that's there as well.
And what do you think? What do you think that does? We can sort of talk about this as an opening and what openings need to do. But what do you think? Like, how do you think the violence works in that opening, or the threat of violence? I guess.
It definitely grounds us in a voice.
Yeah.
It's that sibling violence that is definitely present.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. And it creates suspense, right? It also creates a kind of suspense, and like this, there's something at stake. There's danger. There's.
It's moving,
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that she shows the third person to talk about herself, and that allows that separation so she can observe herself as if she is someone else talking about this girl.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and it adds something to the narrative of it.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Were you going to say something?
It's emotional engaging,
Yeah.
so it leads you on. You feel the anger, the desperation, the violence, and helplessness.
Yeah.
Helplessness of the teenager.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a couple of things that I maybe just want to point out about it. I mean, some of the things that I love, all the points that you all made. A couple of things that really stick out for me about it are, so first of all, I think she uses this technique that is called the major dramatic question. Right? So this is actually, it's a question, it's sort of a technique that I think a lot of works use. Not necessarily consciously, but I think a lot of works have them. And what it is it's a question that is planted toward the beginning of a work. A question that has like a yes, no, maybe answer. And it's the question that basically keeps the reader turning the page. It's what you're reading for, right? So if you think of a novel like The Great Gatsby, right, the major dramatic question, the yes, no, maybe question that keeps you turning the page, just sort of on a plot level is what? Does Jay get Daisy, right? That's just on a plot level what's keeping you turning the page, right? Yeah.
I'm wondering if she survives.
Exactly. So here the major dramatic question, and it's right there at the beginning, it's on the first page, right, is does Roberta kill herself? Right? Because she tells us, well, if you're reading this, it means I succeeded, right? I killed myself. But we don't know, right? So it's the thing that keeps us reading. So that's one of the things I noticed, and I love that technique. And pay attention to it. Think about the works that you really love and see, is there sort of this question that gets planted at the beginning that just kind of pulls the reader through? Right? It's a great technique. But, the other thing that I really love about this opening is notice the way that she she does this sort of direct address, right? She addresses the reader at the very beginning of the piece. There's dear reader, right? If you are reading this, right? She does all kinds of things with suspense in that opening, right? Planting all these seeds of things that you want to find out. I remember Hannah Tinty once, I don't know if you know the writer Hannah Tinty, but I once saw her speak and she said, the most important things to do in the first 20 pages of a novel is plant as many seeds as you can. Right? And I think that's for the writer, because if you don't have enough seeds, you don't have enough that will grow later on. Right? And there are so many seeds at the beginning of this novel. And also, I have to say, having written a novel, you don't know what seeds are going to grow and which ones aren't. Right? So anyway, there are lots of seeds planted here. But then I think the last thing that I really notice here, and maybe it's the most important thing, and I guess some of you all kind of addressed it maybe without quite using this term, but it's the voice, right? That voice. I remember once this was kind of recently, talking to the director of an MFA program, like a very competitive MFA program that gets 500 applicants or 600 applicants for, just a few number of spots. And I asked him, how do you pick 6 people out of 600 applicants? And do all of you, do all the committee members agree on them? It must be, you must have at least 50 students or more who would be amazing. And he was like, it's surprising, but we very often agree on 5 or 6 people. It's really clear. And so I sort of pressed him on it. I was like, well, what is it? What is it about those 5 or 6 people? And he said, and I'm gonna read what he said so I can get it right. He said, this is me paraphrasing, but he said, when you read their stories, it's like having someone step through the page, an individual voice saying something directly to you. And that something is some essential truth about what it means to be human. Right? So there's a sense that someone is stepping through the page and speaking directly to you. Right? And saying something with some urgency. Right? Saying something that feels like it needs to be said. Right? A writer I studied with, Mary Carr, she told the story in class once of, so this was before she got sober, waking up one morning. The story is about a time before she got sober, not okay, so she told the story of waking up early one morning. I think she was still drunk. She was either still drunk or badly hungover, and her young son, young at the time, was sort of planted in front of the TV, and watching Mr. Rogers, like just inches away from the TV, and she sort of planted herself, and they both sort of like got sucked into Mr. Rogers, and she turned to her son and she said, "Remind me why we like Mr. Rogers so much?" And her son said, "Because he's talking just to us." Right? You know, and I think that that's part of what Linda Berry does here, and I think that's part of what really good work does. Okay, now I'm going to read a little more because I'm nervous. Pardon? Thank you. In her Writing the Unthinkable workshops, as well as in her brilliant book, What It Is, part memoir, part writing instruction, Berry stresses the importance of envisioning the creative process not as work, right? This is my work, we are used to saying about our writing, right? I mean, we all say that, right? This is my work. So she stresses the importance of envisioning the creative process not as work, but as play. And play not in a carefree summer day swinging on the swing set kind of way, but play in the deepest sense of the word. When children play, Berry notes, they're often working through questions, problems, issues. For children, play is a vital tool for processing their experiences and their relationships, for trying on identities and testing ideas, for pushing against boundaries. It is a crucial way by which they make sense of the world around them. And yet, even as they are doing this important and essential work, and there's that pesky word again, work, they are enjoying themselves. Right? They can't get enough. Right? You know, you never encounter a child who's told to draw a picture or to write a story who says, "I have writer's block," right? I mean, children don't do that, right? But Berry is also quick to point out the quickness of children to destroy the very things that they've spent hours making. Right? A child will spend all morning building an elaborate world from cardboard tubes, shoe boxes, and empty milk jugs, only to turn around and in seconds level it Godzilla style. Right? You know, so for me, that's a really valuable lesson in non-attachment. Right? I don't know if you all have sort of heard this. I heard this all the time when I was in grad school. People used to love to say this: process over product. I don't know if you all hear that much, but you know, back when I was in grad school, my sort of mentors were obsessed with that, right? Process over product. It's the process that matters, not the product, right? And, you know, part of the way I've come to understand that, and especially I think now, you know, having been a writer for many years and having written a couple books, you know, I have to say that, you know, this book that I just published a few months ago, this novel that I worked my butt off for, that was really difficult to write in a lot of ways. It was difficult on a technical level. It was difficult on a formal level, but it was also really difficult on an emotional level. I mean, I had to work through some real shit to to write that book. Stuff, sort of emotional stuff that had to do with the past, but also just emotional stuff that had to do with what I thought my worthiness was as a writer, what I thought I was capable of, what I thought I deserved. A lot of stuff that I had to work through. Anyway, so what I wanted to say about that is, as proud as I am of the book, the thing that I'm most proud of is actually not the book. It's the person I think I started to become in the process of writing the book. Right? That is the thing that I'm most proud of. Going back to this idea of children and play and non-attachment to the thing that you've made, right? I think it's a really important lesson. I mean, children don't cling to these things that they've made, right? They're quick to give away their drawings, right? To give it all away. And I love that idea, and it's something that that I take from Linda Berry. Trying to think if we should just get to the writing exercise. Well, let me do one more thing. Okay, so this is actually a quick writing exercise before we get to a longer one. I want you to think of a monster from your childhood. Right, so this is a memory exercise. So think back to a monster that haunted you when you were a child. Right? We all had them. Right? And I'm going to give you like 3 or 4 minutes to just write about that monster. So you can describe the monster if you want. Right? Or maybe you can describe a memory with that monster. For me, it was the closet monster, the monster that lived in the closet. So take maybe 3 or 4 minutes to write a little bit about this monster from your childhood. I'm just going to give you another minute for this. So just with a show of hands, when I said think of a monster from your childhood, how many people had an instant, okay, interesting. All right, so no having to search your memory. People had, that's really interesting. I want to read you a little bit from what Linda Berry, so Linda Berry is really interested in monsters. I want to read you a little bit of what she says about monsters in her book, What It Is. And I'm putting up the pages here, but I'll read it to you. Though I knew she didn't exist, the monster I was most afraid of was the Gorgon. I hated the thought of her, but she was often on my mind. I made plans for how to defend myself from her. I'd scare myself with the thought of seeing her behind me in the mirror, of accidentally looking at her face. She paralyzes you. You have to cut off her head without looking at her face. Sometimes I managed, and other times she got me. I'd practice being paralyzed and turning into stone. Sometimes I did this in front of my mother to see if she would notice. Sometimes I turned to stone in front of the yard. Once I made myself fall off my bike as if I had seen her while coasting down the street, trying to freeze myself exactly as I fell. I believe a lot of kids play with monsters in this way, that most of us had a certain something that really scared us and seemed to have it in for us, a something we had to defend ourselves against in secret ways. I never talked about the Gorgon. I didn't know she was mythical and ancient and also called Medusa, or that she had a history and relatives and never looked in the mirror. I only knew her from a monster movie I saw one afternoon when I was about 8, but it was all I needed. I sat through the Gorgon twice because the first time she got her head cut off, I looked away. And I realized it was something I needed to see, something I needed to know how to do. That I had a very Gorgon-like mother never occurred to me. And if it had, I would have been lost. Did the Gorgon help me love my mother? I think she helped me very much. We never need certain monsters more than when we were children. And a furious woman with terrifying eyes and snakes for hair was a perfect monster for me. What was yours? All right, so you all just wrote about your monster. I want you to just think for a minute, and I'm not going to ask you this, but does the monster correlate to something? Right? The way that for Linda Berry it correlated to her mother, right? And for me, I don't mind revealing this, for me, I was really scared of the closet monster, right? I could not go to bed unless the closet door was shut. Sometimes I even had to barricade it. And I actually still to this day, I cannot go to bed if the closet door is open, right? And for looking back at it, it's such an obvious metaphor to me, right? The closet. Of course I was scared of the closet, of course I was scared of what was in the closet, right? So I just want you to think for a second, and again, I'm not going to make you answer this, but think about it just for a second. Does that monster correlate to something? So Linda Berry wrote this whole book, another book that you have to get. Basically you have to get everything Linda Berry ever wrote. But it's called 1! 100! Demons! And it's 100 cartoons about 100 demons, right? And some of them are, sort of very light-hearted, right? So one of the demons is she writes about how she used to love dancing until she became, a self-conscious tween and decided she wasn't good at dancing, right? And then she stopped dancing. right? So that demon was sort of like self-consciousness, right? So some of them are kind of lighthearted, some of them are more serious, right? The suicide of a dear friend or childhood sexual abuse, right? But there are all these different demons. And her book, 100 Demons, actually comes from a Buddhist meditation called Feeding the Ghosts. And maybe I'll read a little bit from what there's a Buddhist nun called Pema Chodron, what she says about feeding the ghosts. So in her book Start Where You Are, Buddhist nun Pema Chodron tells the story of a Buddhist master, Milarepa, who returned one day to the cave in which he lived to find it overrun with demons. He tried reasoning with the demons, he tried threatening them, scaring them off, but no matter what he did, he could not get rid of them. It was only when he stopped resisting them, when he said, okay, well, you're not going to leave me alone, come on in, right? Come on in, demons. And in fact, here's some cake, right? Put out cake for the demons, put out cake for the ghosts. It was only when he invited them in that they lost interest in him and left. So Linda Berry used that Buddhist meditation structure of feeding the ghosts to sort of write this book about the different ghosts in her life, the different demons. And it's something that has actually been very influential to me, to sort of think about work that way, right? To think about, okay, well, what are the demons and what are the ways in which I can sort of engage with them and, maybe invite them in. But in a way that's playful. I mean, I think one of the things that you'll notice about her work is it's always playful, right? I mean, even as she's writing about this really complicated relationship she had with her mother, right? And I think that, her mother was abusive, right? Verbally abusive, physically abusive, etc. Right? And she gets at all of that, right, in her work. But there's also like this playfulness, right? I mean, this thing about like, practicing freezing, right? Falling off her bike and like doing freeze. Because she had to practice what would she do? What would happen if the Gorgon got her? So I love that idea of sort of engaging with demons, but doing so in the way that has kind of like this childlike, I mean, I think it's all about sort of capturing that childlike attitude. Right? I think the more that we can do that in our work, the more that we're going to make work that we feel really good about. All right, let's do Linda Berry's exercise. So this is about a 25-minute exercise. You need a few sheets of paper. You have to handwrite this. You cannot type it. So those of you who have your computers out, put them away, get out some sheets of paper. Linda Berry believes very strongly that when we do this, when our hand moves, our brain fundamentally does something different than when we type. That making marks on paper engages it with our brain in a totally different way. How many people actually handwrite their work? Okay, a lot of people. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I handwrite all of my first drafts. And Linda Berry, not only does she handwrite her novel Cruddy, she actually wrote that entire novel with a Chinese calligraphy brush on like huge sheets of paper. She had an easel and she hand wrote the entire thing using calligraphy brushes. And I've actually seen the pages. They're like amazing. All right, so step one. Actually, the very first step, and I'm just going to kind of skip this, is she usually leads people through a guided relaxation. And because of time reasons, I'm going to skip that. But I do actually recommend doing that, taking 5 minutes to sort of do a relaxation. And the way that she does it, and the way that I recommend doing it, is just kind of to sort of sit quietly and visualize your body relaxing from head to toe, and you just sort of tell yourself, and you can tell yourself out loud, or you can tell yourself, just silently, my head is relaxing, my head is now relaxed, my neck is relaxing, my neck is now relaxed, and just sort of working your way down through the body. Okay, so the next step is, so on your sheet of paper, I want you to number 1 to 10, skipping maybe a space between each number. Okay, so this is a memory exercise. So I want you to work from personal experience. So it's sort of a memoir exercise. So I'm going to give you a category, and I want you to list the first 10 things from your memory, the first 10 memories that come to mind. If you get past 10, you can keep going. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to do it. If it pops into your head, write it down, even if it doesn't make sense to you. And the category is cars. Cars. So 10 cars from your past, 10 cars from your memory. Okay, just take a few seconds to finish this list. All right, and from this list, I want you to choose one that feels like it has a particularly strong memory attached to it, that feels like it has some sort of charge attached to it. Linda Berry sometimes says, choose the one that when you look at it, you get a feeling in your stomach. And then you can just circle it. So one that has a particularly strong memory attached to it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to zero in on a specific moment, a specific experience. that involves that car, right? So if you want to just think for a second about what that would be, right? A specific memory, a specific moment. Right? And then when you're ready, you can turn the page on a blank sheet of paper. You can just write that thing at the top, right? Just at the very top of it, just write that thing. And then I want you to draw a big X on your page from corner to corner. Okay, so I am going to ask you, so does everyone has like an image in mind, a memory, a moment? Okay, everyone has one. Okay, I'm going to ask you, I want you to put yourself back in that moment. I'm going to ask you a series of questions about that moment. And you can just scribble your answers to the questions wherever you want on that big X page. Okay. Where are you? Where are you? About how old are you in this image, in this memory? About how old are you? What time of day or night does it seem to be? What time of day or night does it seem to be? What season does it seem to be? Where is the light coming from? Where is the light coming from? And what kind of light is it? What is the temperature like? What does the air smell like? What are you doing? Why are you there? Is there anyone else there with you? And if so, who? And what are they doing? Is there anyone who just left or who may be coming? Anyone who just left or who may be coming? What are some of the sounds you can hear? What are some of the sounds you can hear? And that might include snippets of dialogue. And you might think about, there are some sounds that are loud or easy to hear. There's some sounds that are quieter. You have to really pay attention to hear. So what are some of the sounds? What are some of the things you can see? What are some of the things you can see? What is directly in front of you? What is directly in front of you? What is to your left? What is to your right? What is behind you? What is above your head? And what is below your feet? What is below your feet and around your feet? Okay, so turn the page. I'm going to give you 7 minutes to write the scene. But before you do that, so you know that people always say, like with fast writes, you're supposed to keep your pen moving. The goal is to not stop your pen. But we all know that that can sometimes be difficult, right? We sometimes get a little stuck. Our pen stops. Oh no, what do we do? Our pen stopped. So what Linda Berry says is when you get stuck, instead of stopping your pen, move it over to another part of the page or even another page and start making a spiral. Right? Keep your hand moving. When you get your train of thought back, you're ready to go back to the scene, go back to writing. If you get stuck again, go back to the spiral, continue where you left off. Okay? So that your hand is in constant motion. Okay? So I'm going to give you 7 minutes to write the scene. I want you to write it in first person present tense, as if it's happening now, starting with the words, I am. Right? Go. I am. Perhaps above all else, and I think this is what I want to end on, for me, Linda Berry's work served as a reminder to have faith and to be brave and to face my demons and to have fun doing it. As Linda Berry would say, the ghosts can only get you if you let them.